In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
The Daily Memphian Memphis Grizzlies Podcast is sponsored by the FedEx Employees Credit Association, offering savings, checking, and lending to all FedEx employees, retirees, and their family members. Online at fecca.com.
Welcome to the Daily Memphian Grizzlies Podcast. Your normal host, beat writer Drew Hill, got married this past weekend. He is out gallivanting around the globe. I'm Chris Herrington, columnist here at the Daily Memphian. So instead of catching Drew's alley-oop passes, I'm going to be throwing them this week. And I got a high flyer to step into Drew's place. Our old friend Matt Hrdlicka, a big Grizzlies fan, smart guy who writes about the Grizzlies and books and various other things that strike his fancy at his own Patreon page, of which I am a proud subscriber. How's it going, Matt?
It's going good. It's going good. Thanks for having me on.
So I saw you just a few days ago. I've run into you. We've conversed in the flesh twice this season at Grizzlies games. One of them was this past weekend, game 81. There was no reason to think that game was going to be worth watching at all. There you were with a baseline seat as a fully engaged, needing to win LeBron James is barreling at you like a freight train. Earlier this season, I ran into you in New Orleans, a game that there was every reason to be at, the Ja Morant return game in New Orleans. There you are in a baseline seat as Ja Morant hits one go-ahead shot in the last 90 seconds, then a second go-ahead shot in the last 90 seconds, and then a game winner at the buzzer in which he descends from the sky almost into your lap. Matt Hrdlicka, how did you pull this off?
Like any true achievement in life, it's complete blind luck. For the New Orleans game, I mean, my family lives on the North Shore, so I was there. We were there, my wife and I and the kids, just visiting family. Shot down for a game and got blessed. I didn't even know it was Ja's first game back because I had been a dummy and not accounted for the extra play-in games that they added to the schedule. So I messed that up. So we got lucky there, 100%. And then, this game, it was all about my buddy who's an out-of-towner from Dallas. He was trying to triangulate. He wants to watch LeBron with a really good seat. And he blessed me with really good seats. So I said, you pick the date, I'll be there. So we got lucky again. We figured this would be a must win. And then, we were blessed with LeBron playing with the questionable designation. So, just blind luck. No secret sauce here.
So I did my best to recount the experiences you had in those two moments. Relive them for us a little bit. What was it like to be in that spot, those two games and those moments?
Yeah, what the New Orleans game, let's step back and remember just how kind of dark and depressing things were that early. Ja hadn't played. And my wife, I went with my wife to that game, and she was looking at the bench during the whole game, and she was like, you know what? Like, I didn't know what to expect, but the vibes are really good with this team. And I was like, you know what? You're right. Like, you see the bench engaged on TV and like hooping and hollering, but they were really locked in. And, there's always the local contingent of, this, whose fault is this, that the team is so bad. And I was always on the side of injuries being bad. And then, Ja coming back. So just generally speaking, I mean, the other thing is after that game winner, T Morant's right there. They just do a celebration right in front of us. They do the exit interview right in front of us. The guys are lingering on the court well after the final whistle. It was just nice. Outside of everything else, it was just nice to have the Grizzlies back for one night, Yeah. And then you fast forward to this game. This was the first time ever that I did not know who was on the roster. It was like a 180. I knew GG, obviously, but like Jack White was involved, a gentleman named Timmy Allen, was involved. We had
Seven
a
Nation
guy.
Army and not Tony's little brother.
Exactly. Not the tool man either.
Yeah.
It was just, it's like, I told my buddy, I was like, this has never happened before. I just don't know who these guys are. And they played hard and they pushed LeBron, who, like you said, needed to win. Although I will note, he didn't really try to dribble inside the 3-point line in the half court. So you could tell he was trying to like save it for the last part. But it still was an incredible game. That game had no business being that game. And that's what the beauty of the NBA is. Like, Chris Vernon always says this, you never know what you're going to get. You're going to see something. Like, I saw something I'd never seen in person twice this year, and they were drastically different experiences, even though both games were good.
I call it my box of chocolates theory of the regular season. Like, it could be the game that looks like the greatest setup, and then it's a dud. And then, I mean, one of my regrets is last season, because I didn't have to do the game story, so I didn't go to every single game. I did not go to I missed Ja's 52. Maybe this was 2 seasons ago, but I missed Ja's 52-point game against the Spurs because it's the Spurs. And I missed the beat down of the Thunder where they're up by 75 and and the fans are chanting defense, So those are games I missed because who knew that's what was going to happen if you show up to the arena, but you never know what will happen when you show up to the arena.
Yep.
So as we talk, it's Tuesday here. Yesterday was the Grizzlies' final media session of the season. I was there at FedEx Forum. We won't get into too much depth on that, but if you want to read, we encourage you to go to dailymemphian.com. Drew did a roundup of sort of the highlights of what was said during the day. I did a column sort of trying to synthesize it and put it together as we go into the off season. I thought the most interesting stuff was, it's like you expect, because he only talks like twice a year, 3 times really, was Zach Kleiman. He's the guy making the decisions. We're heading into the off season now. I'll just open it up for you sort of broadly. I mean, what were your sort of takeaways from, you weren't there, but I certainly you've seen coverage of social media, maybe you've read stuff. What jumped out to you?
So I haven't watched his interview. The only pull quote I've seen is the stuff about getting a big man. So it might be better if you lead me, if there's something else interesting. But that was sort of like the main takeaway to me, which is sort of obvious to most Grizzlies fans. They need a big man.
Yeah, to me, it was, he sort of reiterated what he'd said at after the trade deadline when they traded Steven Adams and they traded Xavier Tillman. They'd already let go of Kenneth Lofton. And so, you think of the team that the Grizzlies started the season with, they did 3 like bigs, like big boys, and now it has none. And so he has reiterated we need to add another, at least one more, I would say, but we need to add a rotational big, right? Rotational big could mean a 7-foot, 270-pound dude. It could mean a power forward who's a good rebounder. It could mean a starter. It could mean a backup. So he is committed to. He is saying what I think is obvious is that this is somewhere in the roster that needs attention. We have to add at least a player who's going to be in our rotation, who's in this front court group. But he's very clearly not saying we have to go out and get another Steven Adams or Jonas Valanciunas.
Yeah.
And Taylor Jenkins, when it came up, I thought was interesting. He basically said, and with Taylor Jenkins, you have to sort of, hack your way through the thicket of words to pull it together. But he basically said, I like our offense better when Jaren's at center, when Jaren's the 5. But we've been at our best defensively when we've had a bigger center and Jaren can roam and contest. And what he takes out of that is not like we have to choose one or the path or the other, was that we need the options to go different ways with it. That's sort of the general, I think, framing of both Zach Kleiman and Taylor Jenkins on that.
Yeah. So thanks for that context, because I wasn't sure if there was anything, more to, especially Kleiman's comment about the big man. Adding a big man, like you said, you've kind of always been on the, Jaren is the Swiss Army knife. Jaren's a unicorn. It would be great eventually to get to a point where you can plug in bigs around him to do whatever you need to do. So maybe that is just adding, a bigger, bulkier guy through trade, or maybe one of the small exceptions, or the draft pick. It could also be, swinging a little bit higher, although, you kind of, the unicorns are still rare. So I don't know how, we could speculate on that stuff, but it is, I think what they're saying is the obvious thing rather than a directional, this is where we're going to pour every asset into. It's just kind of an obvious hole right now. They need another big guy.
What do you think of Jaren's season? He's been the guy who he ended up 66 games. I think he could have played more if they'd wanted him to. They didn't need him to. So he was basically played a full season, I would say. He was the one guy who was around all year. I think I wrote a big column about this last week. People can read if they haven't already. I think there was a general consensus that Jaren had a sort of a breakout kind of season. My feeling is a little more complicated than that. In terms of the different facets of his game. But what do you make of the season he had and what that sort of tells you about the usage of him and the way that the team should think about him going into next season?
Yeah. I think probably I think both of us would agree, he's on a great team. He's not the number one option like he was a lot this year. The offensive development, I think he got a lot of reps. The good thing that came out of Jaren's season is that he got a lot of reps of doing stuff that will be necessary, but only as a secondary option, the initiating the offense. He got to be very good at, pulling down a board, dribbling up the court, and then just kind of sizing up his guy. And if you can get enough spacing around him, which is part of what Taylor Jenkins is saying, that second guy is far enough away where Jaren can just get his shoulder around that guy. So that getting reps at that is really important. Yeah, having a guy. Go ahead. Just
to flesh out a little bit what you're saying. Taylor specifically talked yesterday about, and to use his terminology, playing with an empty paint. And I think he's talking about exactly what you're talking about in terms of, the ability of someone like Jaren to attack off the dribble, and not just Jaren, guys back or whatever, but to have that spacing to sort of get into the paint that way. I think people think about it in terms of, throwing up 3-point shots or whatever, but I think they're talking about empty paint in some ways to a bet or more rim pressure.
Yep. I mean, and it works both ways too. I mean, if the defense knows that Jaren has in his bag the ability to get a shoulder past the big's going to be giving him a little bit more space. And now Jaren has more room to just kind of walk into a 3-pointer. So, I mean, all that stuff helps. But, I'm not going to say I was disappointed in Jaren's season because I'm not. It was just a completely different context. Yeah. And
I think it's all team context related.
Team context related. And to his, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to his interview on Chris Vernon's show, but he made the specific point of saying, and probably the most meaningful thing that he said, I play better with great players. And so it was kind of an acknowledgement of I'm not going to have this role next year. And I know that, but now I have the reps and the muscle memory and the reference points to do some of these things that I wouldn't have had a chance. I mean, it would take him probably 5 years to get the reps he got this year. But with all that said, the defense took a step back. I mean, the block numbers took a step back. And I think that's what Zach Kleiman is, and maybe Taylor Jenkins are saying, having him as the free man, allows him to sort of get the blocks and be more of a menace on that side. And it just shows that nothing is in a vacuum here. The more you lean into offense, you change his role, you change his abilities, you change his effort level, being, the defensive player of the year and the offensive hub is just not possible for any NBA player in 2024. Right. I mean, unless your name's Giannis. I mean, he's probably done it, but
I have sort of divergent thoughts about some of that stuff. I play better with great players is something you want to say about yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's true in the sense that to the degree that it's an acknowledgement of the team is at its best when I'm not dependent on to do this much offensively. That is categorically true. Jaren had this enormous usage. I want to say at some point, after the Bane and Morant injuries happened in early January, maybe. At that point forward, I think Jaren has the third highest usage in the league behind Joel Embiid and Luka Doncic. So that's just silly. And so the idea that he needs to have a more offense-defense balance and be a little bit lower in the offensive pecking order to the benefit of the team, I think is obviously true. And it's good that there's a recognition of that. Yeah. On the other hand, one of the real sort of struggles of Grizzlies basketball in this era, and part of it's just happenstance and when injuries happen, everything else, it feels like we still haven't had a great Jaren consistent on-court interaction. And the idea of his own game is elevated by, not that the team is better, but his game is also elevated by that partnership with Ja Morant. I don't think has fully come to fruition yet. That's the one sort of, I guess, not negative, but more sort of questioning note I have on that.
Yeah.
On the other side of it, I think for as much attention as the growth in scoring and the isolation scoring and the self-creation, to me, the most meaningful thing that advanced for Jaren this season as it relates to the integration with a better team next season is the passing.
Passing.
And he's not a creative playmaker still for the most part. And the passing numbers are still low. The assist numbers are still low relative to this huge usage.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot higher in terms of from a assist rate ratio percentage, all those different ways to look at it. So much higher than it's been for him in the past.
Yeah.
And I always thought the passing was never going to come. I thought that'd be the last piece of the puzzle Jaren got to. And I think this season, you have seen him make the simple pass much more frequently and much more confidently than in the past. Make the simple read, the simple pass. He's just gotten a lot more comfortable, just basic ball movement stuff that I think is really going to pay a lot of dividends when he's just in the flow with a better team next season.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I talked for a long time and never mentioned his passing. To me, a lot of the passing, like I agree with you. I don't think I was in your camp. I didn't ever think it was going to come. But, weird things happen when you're thrown into a role and you're just allowed to kind of explore the studio space. And like I said, I think he got 5 years of offensive reps in 1.5 season, I still am a little bit more pessimistic, I think, but I do agree. Like the bar was fairly low. He's not a natural passer. I think a lot of it is like his hand. I think he got more comfortable with his handle. And when you're more comfortable about getting to your spots with your handle, you're not worried about the ball getting stolen, which makes the pass more easy. You're able to kind of like keep your eyes up.
Right.
So, I think I'd be willing to sign off on that idea. I think I don't know if I kept a close enough eye to like really see it, but I do kind of.
I'm partly influenced on this, not just by watching him play, but some of the interactions I've had. Like I remember in training camp being in a little scrum with him on the practice court in training camp, and him saying, "This is back when." At this point, they didn't even know Steven Adams wasn't going to play. They thought John would be back after 25 games. He didn't know he was going to be in this situation. But he said then, like when you ask him, like, what are you working on? What's the things, the things you want to grow in your game this season? He brought up, I need to do a better job at making reads, at recognizing double teams earlier and moving the ball out of that. And, he was very focused on that before the season. And then you start to see it a little bit here and there on the floor. Yeah. And then I know at one point it was the game, Desmond Bane's return game, whatever game that was. Jaren had, I think, 5 or 6 assists that night. And I remember there was a little scrum with him in the locker room. And then when Bane was ready, the scrum just moved, right? And so I lingered with Jaren for a second and just asked him about that and just said, do you feel like, you're seeing things better? I reminded him, you talk about this in the preseason, do you feel like it's happening? You feel like you are processing the game better than you had been before? And he said yes. And he said yes in a way that I could sense a real pride that he had, and he felt like he was making progress at something he wanted to be making progress on. And so I think, you're starting at the bottom on this one. Like this was the biggest weaknesses of his game initially. And it's nowhere close to a strength, but I feel like he's becoming more proficient at something that he knew that was a weakness and that he knew was a weakness with him.
That's the value of local reporters. You were able to get a read on him and just in person, and him over the years. I mean, it's that's really good to hear. That's a context I don't get.
Right. I want to get it back and follow that front court things stuff into the draft a little bit. But first, a couple other things just on the season as we wrap it up. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things on the season, in a bad year, one of the most interesting things was the sorting that happened sort of among the wing players. And the Grizzlies went into the season with this just jumble of unproven young wings.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember at the start of the season, like the top of that pecking order was Zaire Williams and David Roddy. Zaire Williams was starting lineup when the season opened.
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment that Ja came back, I remember writing about this, the third most minutes played on the team had been David Roddy. I don't think it's an accident the how poor of a start they got out to, given the amount of minutes that were going to those two players and how they were playing. But what happened over the course of the season is suddenly like Williams is like injured and off the table, and Roddy is traded, and then you look up and like it's GG Jackson, I think Vince Williams, and then GG Jackson, and then Jake LaRavia. Those three players have sort of risen to where like Williams and Roddy were at the beginning of the season. I don't know. I think you and I may be close to there. I think Zach Lyman is too on Vince Williams. I think with the other two, these are still works in progress. And given the nature of the season, there's a question of how much to really believe and not relative to competitive basketball. But where are you on sort of those guys and what you've seen from them this season?
Yeah, I wrote a really long GG scout. First of all, I think we're right on the same page on Vince. I mean, you can just kind of project his role on next year's team. He's way older than the other two guys too. So especially GG. So, I think he's just kind of going to be good. GG, I wrote a long scout about him a couple weeks ago, and, basically, I mean, everybody knows this, but his role on next year's team is going to be drastically different than this year. And he just needs to fill out the rest of his game. He's not going to get the same amount of shots. The shots are the thing that is the easiest to port around. But, if he's getting, instead of, whatever, 36 shots he took the other night, maybe he's getting like 10, and I still think, I mean, like, he's huge. He can handle, he does fly in for blocks and, some offensive rebounds every now and then, but we need to see more of like, how is the scoring role going to shift? Is he going to be better off of cuts next year than he was this year? Is he going to be doing any screening? Because they started him with screens, kind of like playing him as a power forward, and then they just kind of put the ball in his hands once Bane was out. I mean, the screening is not easy. It's not just your big people are gonna. I mean, you have to have the will to do it. You have to be strong. He could be a good screener, and that unlocks a lot of other stuff. But his efficiency, and I don't know the numbers in the last like 2 weeks when the season just went completely off the rails, roster wise, but his efficiency was basically a product of corner 3-point shooting. Like, he was below average everywhere else. So I'm a little hesitant to be like, maybe this is variance, but at the same point, he just plays more like a wing than a power forward anyway. So like, if you poured his efficiency numbers onto a wing, they look like 50th percentile, and that's pretty good for a 19-year-old who's, taking a bunch of shots. So, I threw out the comp of like, hey, what if the defense and the passing never comes along, and he's like, he could be Brandon Ingram. And I got the only comments I got were, how are you so low on GG Jackson? Right. No, I just compared it to a max contract guy. Like,
Kevin Durant and LeBron James, those are the comps we're dealing with.
Yeah, right. So I mean, it's anybody's guess. He could be anything. I think the one thing I will say is I feel like his game going forward is gonna have to be focused on, like, I don't see him being a defense first player. I mean, he's just got too many moves for that. And I think, the question now is how much of this late season, empty roster stuff is portable to the full-time Grizz. So I talked a while. I but didn't even get to Jake yet. Jake played well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Jake a little bit too. But on GG, I think it's encouraging that he volunteered. When he talked yesterday about how the challenge is to integrate himself with better players when the stars get back or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think it's notable. You can tell, especially even more so Dez and Ja, but I think Jaren too. You can tell that the stars think highly of GG.
Yes,
and what GG can be, and I think that is a good tell, and also probably important in terms of the idea. I see as more of they're going to try to bring him along, and rather than like a friction in terms of his role.
Yeah.
I think you bring up an interesting point about when the injuries became such that he got so much opportunity just to hunt shots and to generate shots and to have the ball. And that I do worry. I think he's always going to be a scoring oriented, offensive oriented player.
Yeah.
But I do worry a little bit that the offense and the scoring. Offense is more than scoring. Let's back that up. That the scoring has come so quickly that it might hold back other parts of his game that need to come along, even if that's not going to be the primary. He has had good moments defensively. I think the good moments have been mistaken for good defense, which is a little bit different kind of a thing. But he's had moments where he's like, you're on an island, against a good player and you got to lock in and like D up that guy. That's a little bit different from sort of the feel of team defense. But he has had moments, one-on-one that, again, no one's going to be a good defender at, barely 19 in the NBA.
Right.
I don't know about the rebounding and some of that kind of stuff. But if he can be someone who just holds his own on, guarding his guy a little bit and then, emerges as a scorer, I do think he's more of a wing and like a real 6'8", 6'9", real wing. I mean, that's sort of hard to come by, But that also brings us to Jake LaRavia. I think he's more of a wing too. I think when they drafted Jake, they thought he was going to be more of a forward. I think he's not.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you?
Yeah. So with Jake, I'm still pretty. I mean, the shot went in, which is basicly the difference between.
Well, the shot is erratic. I mean, if you look at the percentages on the season, it's. I mean, there's a lot of 1-7s and 0-6s and stuff out there too.
Fair enough, but recall early season Jake when the shot never went in. It was not erratic. It was very consistent and not going in. And now we see flashes, and especially some of the shot making off of a live dribble is important. I am still somewhat skeptical because he just doesn't really dribble into the he is an entirely dependent offensive player, I think. I am still pretty skeptical about his ability to, unless he has a crease generated for him, get inside, like dribble anywhere near the rim. His passing is pretty good, but
he generates fouls at a pretty high rate.
Does he?
Not finished very well, but he does generate fouls at a pretty high rate.
Yeah.
Aggressive.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I'm kind of anchored to the athleticism thing with him. I don't know if he passes the bar for me, but he still hasn't played that many minutes, and I'm willing to be wrong. And I think pretty strongly, like only one of him or Santi is going to be on the roster next year. I just feel like those players are, in my mind, they're a little duplicative. I don't know if you feel the same way or not. But
you get GG to that same mix, and GG will be back, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, no, I agree. I don't know if I'm certain that one of them will be gone, but I'm certain that they won't both be here beyond their rookie contracts. And so I do think there's some sorting that needs to happen there.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see that because Santi is. I think Jake LaRavia has sort of he's passed the first rung on the ladder to me. That's what he's accomplished. The first rung on the ladder is, we may have to waive this guy for a roster spot. And I think he's.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not there at all. I was never really there, but I understand. Okay, yes, I agree 100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think he's graduated from there. I think at his contract, to me he's now a positive value, even if a very minor in a minor way, where I mean, in the absence of something better to do, I'm happy to have Jake LaRavia on my team for $3 million with a team option for the next year or whatever, right? Santi is eligible for a contract extension this summer. They don't have to give him one. He's under contract next season on the rookie deal no matter what. If he got an extension, it wouldn't kick in for another year. Given the sort of up and down season he kind of had, and given the tax crunch, and given the emergence of GG Jackson and the other stuff around him, I have a hard time seeing him getting an extension. And if he's not going to get an extension, that would seem to me to make him a prime trade candidate this summer.
Yep.
So I wonder about that. The other guy I would throw out there, and this is different positionally, but he gets into the same mix in terms of just bodies and numbers, is Luke Kennard.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think there's a lot of assumption Luke Kennard will be back among a lot of Grizzlies fans. There's a lot of assumption among national media people that Luke Kennard is not going to be back because they look at the spreadsheet.
I know.
I'm torn between the two because I look at the spreadsheet and but I also know that like they really value the shooting. So where are you in the guard?
Yeah, I am somewhere in between. I mean, everything is in concert with where the pick is. You know, if the pick turns into a top 4 pick with a big number attached to it, I think they're going to be very aggressive about either restructuring Luke Kennard's contract, you know, opting him out and signing him to a lower number, or trading him. I think of him as somewhat neutral value on his deal, the 1 year. And I'm a little foggy on whether the team that acquires him can opt him out. I think it probably is a timing.
I think you have. I believe you have to do the team option in order to trade him.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
So he can't be on an expiring contract, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think given what Grayson Allen just got, I am thinking probably the extension number is a little bit higher than I thought it would be for Luke. I think the right thing is to bet against any individual move, but Luke and Santi are the guys that I'm kind of looking at that are the neutral to positive salary filler in a deal. And I think it's very likely that one or both is, or not very likely, but it's likely one or both is used in a deal, which we know they're working on because, like Zach Kleiman said, they need a big man. Not that, I mean, like they're looking at stuff, you know, and those are the contracts that would be used.
Well, and if he's saying categorically, we're going to add a rotation level big, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if that player does the path of least resistance is just taking that player in the draft.
Right.
There's a better than even chance, I would say, that they don't take that player in the draft, which means you have to find some other mechanism to do it. Before we run out of time, I may have to try to get you back on sometime between now and late June to talk draft stuff because we're going to run out of time. But you do have your early board. You posted that on your site. You are Grizzlies fandom's foremost anti-Donovan Clingan guy. Tell us about Donovan Clingan.
Yeah. I want to prepare your listeners for the truth. I am not a draft expert, you know, and honestly, if we fast forwarded to June and the Grizzlies select Donovan Clingan, their draft guys are way better than me. So I would probably say, hey, good pick. Let's see what happens. But I would caveat it with everything I'm about to say, which is that if you look on the best teams in the NBA, you will not find a Donovan Clingan archetype on them. Boston has guys who shoot. Oklahoma City has guys who shoot. Denver has Jokic. I mean, you just look at all the 50-win teams. You have to get to.
He'd need to become a Gobert kind of player.
Yeah, so become the best defensive center and possibly in history.
Right.
Like it just it's a narrow path for him to really.
He's more likely to be Jakob Poeltl than Rudy Gobert, and in fact, Jakob Poeltl would be a good outcome.
Yeah, and the guy I think of with him is Ivica Zubac, so it's like a similar profile.
That's the other one. Yeah, I wonder if his passing is such. I mean, I'm going to write all this at some point, but it's sort of in my head. Yeah. So to me, like the 99th percentile outcome is like a Gobert, and like the 80th percentile outcome is like a young Steven Adams. If the passing comes around, that ability to sort of be a high post hub, because I think that's the difference between Adams and between a Poeltl and a Zubac, and maybe he can become that. But if if the passing doesn't develop, then like your, 50, 60th percentile outcome, which is still a starting quality player, is, Zubac, Poeltl, those kind of players. And I think that's worth having for the Grizzlies. Is it worth using a top 8 or 9 pick, even in a bad draft on? To me, that's kind of a question.
Yeah, that's where I am. And I think the Grizzlies should be using their assets to make the best team possible, to get like a team that can play in the conference finals. That is kind of like the end game. And I just think the path is too narrow for a big bulky guy like him to eventually become a conference finals player. I'd say the same thing about Rob Dillingham. You look at those teams, they don't have Rob Dillingham's on.
Dillingham's the one guy he's sort of off my board for the Grizzlies. I have a lot more work to do. My thing right now, and I have much more work to do, and the wings, the big wings in this draft, by and large, either did not play college basketball or barely played college basketball, so I don't know as much about them. I wonder. It's not like the Grizzlies have their wing situation wrapped up, but they do have GG Jackson and Vince Williams, and I just don't know. I need to be convinced that one of these guys is going to be a better, because to me they have a quality problem, not a quantity problem on the wing.
Mhm.
And I don't know if I just want more young clutter unless I believe in the player.
Right.
So I'm a little more interested at the moment in Stephon Castle and Reed Shepherd, because I don't know what the long-term future is of Marcus Smart with the Grizzlies. And I think there's a lot of utility in those kind of players, and potentially a lot of utility for the Grizzlies in those kind of players, even with John Morant and Desmond Bane.
Yeah. That's exactly my thought.
All right. We got like 3 minutes before my time's going to run out. So we're going to jump ahead to There's More to Life Than Basketball segment, which I always like to do when I get to host pods. Matt Hrdlicka, citizen of the world, recommend something for us.
So TV wise, me and my wife have been deep diving into Survivor. We've been watching basically every season of Survivor, which we had never watched one since the first season. So that's been really interesting. And there's a huge Survivor hive, even amongst Grizzlies Twitter. There's a Survivor hive. And then, as far as books go, I have read a couple. I'm sure you've probably read some James Baldwin in your life. I've recently gotten
only
into
nonfiction. I've actually not. I've read multiple James Baldwin like essay collection kind of stuff, The Fire Next Time, and 2 or 3 others. I've actually not read his novels.
So I just read The Fire Next Time recently, and I was blown away. I mean, It was just a stunning. It has no business being as poetic as it is for an essay collection. I mean, I was stunned. So The Fire Next Time would be my huge rec to anybody out there.
That's a great rec. That is like a must read for that's like part of the citizenship exam or whatever. My recs are not that weighty, but I'll do 2 quick ones. My favorite album of this year so far is an album by the band Hooray for the Riff Raff, which is really the name for the singer-songwriter Linda Segarra and whoever she happens to be playing with at any time. The album is called The Past Is Still Alive. One of the great things that happens in pop music is sometimes the right person says exactly what they want to say at the exact right time in the exact right way, and it's sort of a magical kind of thing. I don't know. I think she goes by they, but they've been making music for like 10 years. The best album Linda Segarra has ever made or ever will make, and it's a great thing. And she sort of found her moment, sort of a folky indie folk singer-songwriter travelogue kind of thing. A lot of life experiences in it. I highly recommend that. And then while I've been
that down right now,
write that down. The Past Is Still Alive, Hooray for the Riff Raff. And then while I've been packing boxes in preparation for a move that some listeners probably have heard about, I didn't intend to rewatch the whole thing. I was just going to watch the first episode. I rewatched the entire series of American Crime Story, The People versus O.J. Simpson.
Oh, wow.
The docudrama. Is it as good as the documentary series O.J. made in America? No, it's not as high-toned as that.
Mm-hmm.
It's better than you think if you haven't seen it. It's really interesting. It's sort of pulpy in places, but pretty serious in places too. And I'd forgotten this is where Sterling K. Brown broke through. The guy who was nominated for an Oscar this year for American Fiction. He plays Chris Darden, and Sarah Paulson, who I think she's one of our best actors, period, plays Marcia Clark. In the series, it's 1 season, is about the entirety of it as both a public event and a private event for the people involved. But the heart of it is really those 2 lawyers and the mistakes they made and everything that was up against them, and just the hollowing out that occurred for them personally going through that and failing to convict O.J. Simpson. It's a good watch. I recommend it. It's on Hulu.
I love watching failure.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite things.
All right. This has been the Daily Memphian Grizzlies podcast. Thanks for jumping in. Our interim co-host this week, Matt Hrdlicka. It's great to talk to you as always. And we're going to take a couple weeks off, and then we'll be back as we ramp up for the draft.
All right. Thanks for having me.